The important question for a student of IR is, why did Hamas adopt terror tactics on the 7th of October? Right? Now, that's an important question. They're not interested in whether China is a superpower or not. What they're interested in is what are likely to be the consequences of US-China rivalry for the rest of the world. And this is just to give you a sense of the kind of work that we do. I have a book. On the left of the screen, you have this book. I published it 2 years ago. In the middle, that's my colleague Jabin Jacob, who's being interviewed by the German news channel DW on Indian and Chinese troop clashes in 2020.
On behalf of the Department of International Relations and Governance Studies, I welcome everyone to this little talk. The title, as was communicated to the organizers here, was why should one study international relations? And I gave it some thought. I thought what would help, especially if students are interested in the broad area of international relations, is to sort of say that there are at least 3 dimensions to this field. We study international relations. We also, through our studies, try and understand international relations, but there is a way in which we can also shape international relations, and which is why I have decided to, I have changed the title a little and have now called it International Relations, Studying, Understanding, and Shaping. Roughly, this is what I want to do today. I want to talk about, lay out for you some very good reasons, some very strong reasons as to why one should study international relations, and make a gesture towards the prospects that this field offers, the prospects that this discipline offers. I would also give some arguments about why it is a great time to study international relations. I would also talk about very briefly as to what studying international relations means, like in terms of, its specifics. Briefly about career prospects, but I'll say that, beyond career prospects, international relations as a field offers potentially a very happy and satisfied life for those who take interest in it and pursue it as a course of education. And finally, I'll end with talking a little about the attraction of studying international relations at my university. Let's just jump right into this, right? So what is international relations? Ordinarily, when we are referring to international relations, we are referring to an academic discipline. In the same way that physics is an academic discipline, or economics is an academic discipline, sociology is, and life sciences, and so on and so forth, mathematics. International relations is also an academic discipline. But there's a short form to this discipline, and it's called IR, not to be confused with industrial relations. When we talk about IR in my field, we're referring to international relations. Now, this is an academic subject that is fundamentally about the following. It is about interactions amongst and across nation states and non-state actors and world forces. So you just think about the formulation. Interactions that take place amongst nation states, across nation states, and interactions that take place amongst and across nation states and non-state actors, as well as world forces, and the consequences of these manifold interactions. That's the subject matter of the discipline of international relations. Just to give you an example, this discipline, for example, studies US-China relations, which are 2 nation states, their interactions, and the impact of US-China relations on the rest of the world. Or, if you want to put it differently, think of another example. It is about understanding the ways in which Google as a company, X as a platform, and Gandhi as an international figure have gone on to shape international relations. It is also about something like nationalism as a world historical force. I mean, countries around the world are currently seeing a rise of nationalism. So that is a world historical force. It is also about the ways in which artificial intelligence and geopolitics are interacting. There are 2 wars that are going on currently, the big wars that are going on, one in Europe and the other one in West Asia. And in both those wars, there is a very high and a sophisticated use of artificial intelligence. And that then is shaping geopolitics, which is another name for territory based rivalry between nation states. And finally, something like US presidential election and its consequences for war in Europe. So, this is just to give you a flavor of what international relations as a discipline is fundamentally about. It is fundamentally about the studies of interactions between nation states, interactions across nation states, between nation states and non state actors, and between non state actors, nation states, and world historical forces, and the consequences of all of that for everyone else, right? So that's roughly what the discipline is about. It is taught at three levels, basically. So the bachelor's level, master's level, and doctoral level. And at my university, we have international relations offered at the bachelor's level, which is what I'm going to talk about at some length today, but also at the doctoral level. Now, it is not just a discipline, it's not just an academic field, it is also a social science. Now, when I say that it is a social science, what I really mean is that this is a field that is not about opinion, it is about solving puzzles, right? And there's a difference between the two. So if you're an opinion, you're more interested in sort of saying, oh, which side are you on in a particular conflict, or what do you think about a particular new development, such as artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. But that does not make a study a social science. What constitutes a social science is where you have a puzzle, a question, something that bothers you, and something is in need of an answer. So, for example, why did Hamas attack Israel? Why did Russia invade Ukraine? And why are we unable to address the crisis of climate change despite the clear and present danger? I mean, now there are arguments that are made that we may have missed the bus insofar as keeping the temperature rise to under 1.5 degrees level. But why has that happened? When everyone knows that there is a problem here, why are we not able to solve it? We call it the collective action problem in international relations, right? So that's what this field is about. Now, there are two other arguments I want to make. One is that IR is exciting, and the other is that IR is needed. Let's sort of give you a flavor of why IR is an exciting field. It is because there is so much new and interesting and very, very important going on in the world today. There's great power competition. When I say great power competition, what I mean is competition between Russia, United States, Russia, Europe, China, United States, and so on and so forth, right? At the systemic level, at the global level, you have that kind of a competition going on. But then you have many theaters of competition as well. In West Asia, for example, the Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran, they are in competition, and so on and so forth. So there's great power competition. There is war, of course. Then there is financial crisis. I mean, we had one in 2008. There are many financial crises here and there currently forging. Forced migrations of people from Africa to Europe, from South Asia into West Asia, across Europe, and so on and so forth. Economic meltdown. Germany's gone into negative growth recently, and so on and so forth. Global public health crisis. We saw what happened during COVID. They say that another pandemic may be upon us in a few years' time. And then, of course, environmental collapse. Those of you who live in North India, especially in Delhi and in the environments in the surrounding areas, if you're here and say between late October and late December or early January, you'd realize the kind of bad weather and pollution that we deal with, and that's just a manifestation of environmental collapse, right? Now, IR helps us understand these developments in two ways: in a systematic fashion, but also in a useful fashion. When I say systematic, what I mean by that is in an orderly and a careful fashion. Students of IR don't ask questions that journalists usually ask. They ask more substantive questions. Students of IR are not interested in categorizing, for example, Hamas as a terrorist organization. That's not an important question. The important question for a student of IR is, why did Hamas adopt terror tactics on the 7th of October? Right? Now, that's an important question. They're not interested in whether China is a superpower or not. What they're interested in is what are likely to be the consequences of US-China rivalry for the rest of the world, right? And in that sense, IR helps us study something in a systematic, that is an orderly and a careful fashion. We ask sincere questions, better questions, more substantive questions. It's also useful in the sense that if we can respond to these developments according to our situation and needs. If you have a sense of what are called global headwinds, you know, if you have a sense of where the next crisis is going to come from, where the next wars are going to come from, what, for example, might happen insofar as the tension between Taiwan and China is concerned, then you can plan properly. You can look ahead of time and make such decisions about earnings, savings, investment, inflation trends, businesses, and jobs as would be to the advantage of not just yourself but your community, your family, and so on. Your family, your community, and so on and so forth. So IR is useful because it gives you the big picture, and the way in which it offers you training, it allows you to also zoom in and anticipate trends in any one part of the world. Very simply put, for example, and just to give you an example, when the Ukraine-Russia war began, it wasn't long before, for example, in policy circles in India, it became clear that there was an opportunity there for India to take advantage of the realteration of the global fuel market. At the same time, there was this great apprehension about what would happen to availability of fertilizer and the stress that the war was going to put on global food supplies. So there's a way in which if you've done your homework, you got the facts of international relations in any one domain, you can anticipate and prepare better. And you can do that as a financial analyst, you could do that as a business person, as an investor, and of course as people who are shaping policy. So it's in that sense that it is useful as well. Okay, IR is also needed. Now, why is it needed? It's needed primarily because, I mean, there are several reasons. I'm putting just three before you. We are in the middle of, in this, our world is in the middle of a very profound crisis. And it's manifesting at least in three different ways. One, there is a planetary crisis. Environmental damage caused by human activities is now virtually irreversible, right? There's only, I mean, we can mitigate it to some extent, but it almost seems like it has become irreversible now. Those of you who've been observing or whose parents or caregivers have been telling them about changes in weather patterns in different parts of India, you'll know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about environmental damage and planetary crisis. Then there's also a global crisis, and this is manifesting in the form of geopolitical situation becoming worse, and it is likely to get even worse. I teach an introductory course in international relations. At the beginning of the last semester, which was in August 2023, when I started that course, I told my students there was a black swan event in February 2022. Nobody, Europeans did not expect Russia to wage war with Ukraine. It happened. I said that, we're going to see one black swan event at least every year. And in October, you had Hamas attack Israel, right? And what has followed in its aftermath. And I'll not be surprised if there's another black swan event coming our way, which is to say an event that we did not anticipate, we didn't think would happen, but did eventually end up happening. So there is the geopolitical situation around the world is becoming tense. And of course, from the Indian point of view, the regional situation also is becoming more precarious. You see the changes in Afghanistan, the crisis in Pakistan, the changes in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, and of course, the China threat. Now, for all of these reasons, planetary, global, and regional, there's a threefold the picture that is created when you sort of put together these three elements is that of a profound and big crisis. And if there is one academic field which can help us understand this crisis and do something about it, it is IR, right? Now, what we are seeing is that very interestingly, India is rising internationally at a time of this great crisis. And we are rising because our economic profile is rising. We are now the most populous country in the world, which is a potential human resource advantage. There are geopolitical advantages and challenges that are before us. In terms of ideas, there are more people who are willing to listen to what we have to say today. The last time something like this happened was in the 1950s and early 60s. India was a newly independent country. A lot of people were interested in the ideas that India had to share about international affairs. It's the same situation now. So, in terms of ideas as well. And there are areas in which India is providing global leadership, especially in areas of sustainability, etc. So at a time of crisis, there's this great opportunity that we have, but also challenges, right? So if you combine the crisis and the need, what you see is that the world is in crisis and India is rising, and a world that is in crisis is presenting both opportunities and challenges for India. An example of opportunity: when Ukraine war happened, we knew that the global fuel markets were going to be affected, and we thought that we could take advantage of it and become an important player as well as a beneficiary of the altered fuel markets. At the same time, we realized that by staying out of the conflict and not taking sides, we positioned ourselves as a potential mediator, and by virtue of having done that, we were able to build consensus amongst conflicting parties, and that consensus was reflected in, for example, the G20 document that was prepared, the Delhi Declaration that was prepared. Nobody expected that consensus document to emerge, but it did. So that's an example of an opportunity. But the challenge, for example, comes in the form of the China threat. And if the China and the Pakistani, they come together, then it's a twofold threat. So a world that is in crisis and in India that is rising, that mix ends up giving to us both opportunities and challenges. And I've given you examples of one each. I can give you more examples of this, but that's roughly what we are talking about. Now, if India is to take advantage of the opportunities that are provided, and if India's response is to respond successfully to the challenges that are thrown by this world in crisis, then it would need, above all, human resource capacity. And this is here that international relations becomes extremely important. What India needs, are analysts and practitioners of foreign policy and international relations. So it's the people who can go ahead and be part of the foreign policy exercise, but there are also people who will analyze foreign policy, who will analyze international relations, so that they can, in one way or the other, a country like India can actually benefit from that expertise. Now, this capacity for HR, human resource capacity, is needed across fields. We need many more foreign service officers every year than we currently admit officially. I give lectures to our foreign service probationers. They're called officer trainees every year, and I interact with them, and they're very, very bright lot. And every single time I do this exercise, I think about India's immense expands its ambition and the scale of the batch every year. And I realize that we take about between 30 and 40 students every year, 40 officers every year. And my personal belief is we'll need about 250, 300, right? So the numbers got to go up. Now, where are those numbers going to come from? They're going to come from amongst us. And that's something to sort of think about as to as to the need for India to very seriously upgrade its human resource capacity in foreign policy and international relations concern. We need more people to manage India's rising profile, to provide cutting edge responses to mutating challenges, as well as, and for all of these reasons, IR has become a very, very important subject in recent years. Now, there are of course careers in IFS, and a program in international relations, a degree in international relations, does not guarantee you a place in the IFS or in the Indian civil service, but it sets you up advantageously in your pursuit of a career in the civil services. But that's just one area where IR can be helpful. There are also niche areas such as defense and foreign affairs, journalism, that we can tap into. There are also international media organizations, including the globalization of Indian media that is now taking place. So you need people there who are well versed with the international environment, who can negotiate a plurality of cultures and countries and so on and so forth. So even there you need people who are sort of trained in international relations, who sort of go and work those positions. Policy analysts, governance capacity. Any country that gets money, that makes more money, that becomes more ambitious about its governance, requires more people who will do policy analysis for it, right? So that's one area. That's another area. International organizations. There are a whole range of humanitarian agencies currently, both within the UN and outside, that are working and doing fabulous work in conflict zones. They need people. And the more crisis and conflict that we're going to see in the world, the more such people will be needed in terms of human rights, in terms of refugee agencies, in terms of providing all kinds of services to organizations like Doctors Without Borders and so on and so forth. So there is that. Then, of course, if you're in Delhi, there are these embassies, and if you're in other cities where there are consulates, not all of them, but many of them also require what are called political advisors or political officers. These are people who are from native country and who advise or who consult with foreign embassies to provide expertise so that embassies can deal with work their relationships far more effectively with the host country. And then, of course, there are careers in risk analysis and legislative assistance. I'd be happy to talk about each one of them individually if you like. Okay, all of this brings me to the end of my presentation. At my university, which is Shiv Nadar University, technically it is now called Shiv Nadar Institution of Eminence, deemed to be university, because as Mr. Mittal said, we are one of the first, we are one of the 10 private universities in India who have been awarded this status. At our university, we have this Department of International Relations and Governance Studies, where we offer a 4-year research degree in international relations. We call it the BA Research in International Relations. And it is a research degree because it has a research component built into it. So, whoever comes over here gets enrolled in the program. They don't just they don't just do courses, but they also participate in creation of knowledge, which is essentially what research is. Now, we are, my department in the program that we launched it in 2018, and we are pioneers in crafting an undergraduate IR program in the private university space. There are a couple of examples of IR programs that were launched before us. But in terms of how a good IR undergraduate program has to be conceptualized, we've pioneered it. And there are other, institutions, peer institutions as well, that offer similar programs, but we are head and shoulders above them because of the way in which we've conceptualized our program, but also because of the expertise that we offer. Just to give you a sense of this, at my department, my colleagues, including myself, we have expertise in international relations theory, in foreign policy, in China studies, in global governance, in international political economy, in political theory, in international law, in global history. We have teachers who teach Mandarin language and strategic studies, right? So that's the profile that we have in terms of expertise. We've got my colleagues are trained at leading international and Indian universities. And my colleagues are also leading researchers in their field, and each one of us is writing books, writing papers, writing columns, and is producing knowledge, and not just producing knowledge, but also disseminating knowledge. And what all of that means is that there are these three core offerings of the department to all the students who take admission, who work, who study at the department. We offer training, we offer skill, and we offer exposure. When I say training, what I mean is that we offer training in the discipline of international relations. You have to be trained into physics. You have to be trained into economics. You have to be trained into international relations. Recall, I said earlier that this is a science. Recall, I said earlier that this is about questions and answers and not about opinions, right? So you have to be trained into figuring out what are the good questions to ask, what are the important questions to ask, how do you answer them, and so on and so forth. So training in the discipline, we do it very well, and that's because of the expertise that we have and the excellent teachers that we have at the department. And then we offer core skills, and there are four above all that are very, very important: skills of reading, writing, presentation, and thinking. Thinking is a skill; it's not something that comes to us naturally. Some of us may be good thinkers, but thinking is also always domain specific. So they, for example, say mathematical thinking is of one sort, economic thinking is of another sort, artistic thinking is another sort, design thinking is of another sort, IR thinking is also of a different sort. So what you need is to be trained into that mode of thinking. And then, of course, skills about presentation. How do you present your ideas? How do you write your ideas in a manner that are accessible and useful for others? And how do you go about reading text? It's not simply about just pronouncing words and not comprehending what it means. It's also about putting text together to see what is being said beyond the words that are written there. And then, of course, the third thing that we do is we expose our students to external expertise from think tanks, practitioners, and academic spaces. My department offers a great cohort. We have about 110 plus undergraduate students across 4 years currently. And we have PhD students, about 17 or 18 of them at the moment. I don't have the count exactly right now. And this is very, very important. Uh, International relations, because it has got to do with the world beyond one's own boundaries, uh, beyond the boundaries of one's own country, is best studied in the capital city. And we are located that way advantageously. We're in the national capital region, and this gives us the kind of advantage that I think is very important for anyone who's interested in studying international relations. I'll start wrapping this up now. This is just to give you a sense of the kind of work that we do. I have a book. On your left, on the left of the screen, you have this book. I published it 2 years ago. In the middle, that's my colleague Jabin Jacob, who's being interviewed by the German news channel DW on Indian and Chinese troop clashes in 2020. There's a thing that you would see the cover of Philosophy Now. Philosophy Now is the most widely read philosophy magazine in the English language, in the English speaking countries. And one of our fourth year students, Anika Vijapur, published a book review there. And this happened, I mean, I got the news yesterday. So this is just to give you a sense of what we are able to do with our students. And finally, of course, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, because I'm a columnist with Hindustan Times. When the crisis had begun, we had kind of done a little conversation there with the American correspondent of Hindustan Times. Okay, some more work. My colleague Siddharth Malavarapu is there in one of the pictures. My colleague Professor Rajeshwari Raina, who was awarded the Khushu Memorial Award in lecture in 2018, she's featured there. Their books are also available here. Uh, and and then of course some of the events that we perform that we organize. I told you earlier, exposure. So Ambassador Abhay Kumar, these are just recent ones from last semester. We had Ambassador Abhay Kumar, who's the Deputy Director General of ICCR. He was there. Ambassador G Dharmendra, who's the Dean of Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Service of the Ministry of External Affairs, he was there. And then Professor C Rajamohan, and so on and so forth, just to give you a snippet of the events and the kind of work that we do at the department. Okay, but our department is also, and our students are also part of the ecology that the university has to offer. And one of the great things about our department, as well as all the other departments of the university, is that if you do a major in international relations at my department, you could actually also do minor in other disciplines. So sociology, history, economics, design, and so on and so forth. Each one of our class is a multidisciplinary class. So, for example, you're never going to be only studying with international relations students. You'll have students from history, sociology, possibly mechanical engineering, and so on and so forth. And that's because of the way in which the university itself has designed its curricular. We are a comprehensive university. There's almost no university of this scale in India where all the major domains of classical knowledge across humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and the applied fields of engineering and management expertise is available. I mean, that kind of comprehensiveness is not available in any other university at this quality, right? It's just not there. And of course, research at the undergraduate level. There are different ways in which the university sponsors, when I say sponsor, I mean monetarily supports undergraduate research and also provides mentorship for it. Now, all of this, of course, leads me to the question of placements of my department itself. As I said, we started the program in 2018, and we graduated 2 batches. Most of our students have gone on to do either masters. Most of them have done masters. A few have enrolled into PhD programs in the West, primarily in the US and the UK. We've got one corporate placement, and some of our other students are doing work with research and advocacy institutions. Students that sort of did minor with us have gone on to do major in international relations from universities in Europe as well as in Singapore. I'm talking about the National University of Singapore. So that's roughly the profile of our students so far. As I said, early days for the department, but that will just give you an indication of the kind of training that we provide and the enthusiasm that we generate amongst our students.